Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to my review of tonight's edition of Monday Night Raw. And tonight's Raw was held from the Richmond Coliseum in Richmond, Virginia. And I gotta say, tonight's Raw, thought it was an okay show. Wasn't a great show by any means. I gotta say it was better than last week's Raw, which was a piece of shit show last week, where we had that shitty Sami Zayn segment with him bringing out men dressed in drag, as women, being Bobby Lashley's sisters. So, but as I say, tonight's Raw I thought was okay show. Wasn't a decent show, in my opinion, but it was just okay. But we opened up Raw tonight. They did a video package, considering it's Memorial Day. They did a video package of the people who fought for our country, and still people still fighting for our country. It was a very well put together video package tribute for Memorial Day. Very well done video package. And then after it was over, we saw the Richmond crowd chanting, USA, USA. Then we had Braun Strowman end up coming out. He says, when he sees, the Money in the Bank briefcase, he gets motivated because it gives him a shot at the Universal title anywhere at any time. It could be anywhere in the world. And he says at Money in the Bank he's going to destroy 7 other men. Then he's going to climb the ladder and take the briefcase and the contract. And he goes on to say that not only will he be Mr. Money in the Bank, he will be known as Mr. Monster Money in the Bank. He goes on to say that no other men in the match is going to stomp him, and when he wins the Money in the Bank contract, he's going to cash it in on Lesnar, and he says Lesnar is going to get these hands. Then we had Finn Balor end up coming out saying to Strowman that he was the very first Universal Champion, and he never lost a title, which is true. And whenever he thinks about that, he says, Finn says, it eats away at him every single day. And Finn says, he's going to climb the ladder and take back what is his. Braun says, he put up a good, Finn put up a good fight, last week for a little guy. And then we just see Finn then just end up slapping Strowman. Strowman then took Finn and threw him. Finn goes out of the ring. Kurt Angle ends up coming out and says, he sees intensity. And so then he makes a rematch, Finn Balor versus Braun Strowman. And so the match ends up happening after the commercial. So we have Finn Balor versus Braun Strowman. Just like last week, it was a entertaining match between the both of them. Balor and Strowman were decent in the match, but Kevin Owens was on commentary through the match. He ended up, saying shit to Finn Balor and also Braun Strowman during, during when they were still going on with the match. But the match ended in a disqualification because Kevin Owens came down and he ended up pushing Finn off the top. And he then goes under the ring and retrieves a ladder. He ends up hitting Finn with it. Then he tries to go for Strowman. Strowman end up, taking the ladder. Owens end up retaliating out of the ring. And we just saw Strowman end up throwing the ladder. Very good force throwing the ladder. It almost hit Owens, which it was really cool how Strowman ended up throwing that ladder in full force. So, but pretty much that ended it there. But all in all, the match itself, it was entertaining up until the disqualification happened. Then when we came back from commercial, we saw Kevin Owens trying to leave the arena. Kurt, says to Owens, why is he leaving? And he says to Owens, he has a match against Bobby Roode tonight. And so Kurt tells him to go get ready. So pretty much that was that. Then we had Elias was out, saying, the people in this arena tonight are disgusting. And that, he just wants the spotlight on him. He's like, oh yeah, let's not show, the crowd over there. And he says, he wants to play the song. And he wants the people to shut their mouths. And what was funny was it showed a graphic between Seth Rollins and Jinder Mahal, which was the Intercontinental Championship match, which was happening next. You hear Elias go, all right, then I'm leaving. And then we come to find out when Raw came back from the commercial, Elias was still in the ring. And people were telling him just to, leave. All you heard was the crowd say, leave. And then we had Seth Rollins end up coming out, interrupting Elias. Seth ends up throwing a chair out of the ring that Elias was sitting on. Tells Elias, he's like giving him, hands, telling him to leave the ring, telling Elias to leave the ring. And that's when, the crowd was still chanting, leave. So Elias ended up leaving. And, of course, today it was Seth Rollins' birthday. So that was pretty cool. Then we got on with the Intercontinental title match. Jinder Mahal versus Seth Rollins for the Intercontinental title. And Seth was the only standout for this match. Jinder Mahal, not that good in the ring. He pretty much can't wrestle, in my opinion. But you had Sunil Singh interfere in the match at points where he was just trying to trip. He at one point was trying to end up tripping Seth Rollins. And the ref ended up seeing it. The ref ended up throwing Sunil, throwing him out of ringside. Then Sunil came back, and Seth Rollins ended up tossing Sunil in the ring. Then we saw Jinder Mahal in the corner by the turnbuckles. Seth Rollins ended up picking up Sunil and doing a double buster to end up picking up Sunil and throwing Sunil into Jinder Mahal in the corner. But the match ended in a disqualification because Seth was mad about Sunil interfering, so he ended up just taking the chair and hitting Jinder with it. And then we just saw him hitting Jinder on the ramp back up to the stage. Seth ended up hitting Sunil with the chair, and then Seth still had the chair in hand. He caused Jinder to retreat. Jinder ended up retreating to the back. Then we just saw, Seth Rollins. He gets up on the commentary table, ends up celebrating. Then from out of nowhere, Elias comes and hits his guitar to Seth's back, and Seth ends up falling off the commentary table. And then when Raw came back from the commercial, Seth was on a stretcher, and he ends up getting back up. And when he was on the stretcher, he was saying, "Give me a minute, give me a minute." And so, we saw Seth get back up. He got back up, and he was being held to the back. And it was pretty cool. How he got up from the stretcher, and he didn't want to be stretched out. So that was pretty cool of Seth. So, and then we saw Nia Jax end up coming out, and then Ronda Rousey ended up coming out. Ronda joined the commentary table because it was Nia Jax sort of getting ready to have a match with a local jobber by the name of Michelle Webb. But it wasn't really a match. It was just Nia ended up sending a message to Ronda Rousey of what to expect at Money in the Bank. Nia says she's glad Ronda came out, and what she's going to do to her at Money in the Bank. And this Michelle Webb ends up putting Nia in a armbar. Nia ends up breaking out of it, and she ends up slamming Michelle Webb. Ends up slamming her down. So pretty much Nia going back to being a heel after coming off her feud with Alexa Bliss. And Nia says, Michelle Webb can still go. She then ends up laying her out with a Samoan drop and also a leg drop. And Nia says for Ronda to come down and help Michelle out. Ronda ends up coming down, and Nia says to her that her look, that sort of like pissed off look that Ronda always has, Nia ends up calling it humorous, and then Nia just end up leaving the ring. So basically it was just that, Nia just trying to send a message to Ronda, prepare for the match at Money in the Bank. And we're only 3 weeks away from Money in the Bank. So, but it was an okay segment. Then we had Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt versus the Ascension. This match wasn't that good, in my opinion. But Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt end up getting the win. They hit the kiss of deletion on Victor of the Ascension. Not that good of a match, in my opinion. Then we saw the B team, Kurt Axel, Bo Dallas. They were backstage with Kurt, and Kurt says to Kurt that they want a Raw Tag Team Championship match. Him and Bo Dallas. And they want a Raw Tag Team Championship match against Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt. Kurt ends up saying to them, by winning 2 matches, it does not qualify them for a Tag Team Championship opportunity. And so pretty much, they were basically, slamming, Kurt Angle, them being unhappy that, that Kurt doesn't want to grant them an opportunity for the Raw Tag Team Championship. And, whenever, they were talking, crap about Kurt, Kurt was like, "Oh, I could hear you." So pretty much that was basically the backstage segment. But it was pretty funny. Then we had Kevin Owens versus Bobby Roode. This was an okay match. It was back and forth between Owens and Roode. You actually had Owens do that cannonball outside of the ring to Bobby Roode, while Bobby Roode was, by the barricade. And at the end of the match, Kevin Owens was going for the pop-up powerbomb to Bobby Roode, but Bobby Roode ended up countering it, but Kevin Owens ended up rolling up Bobby Roode, and so Kevin Owens wins the match. Then you had, after the match, Braun Strowman ends up coming out, just stalking Kevin Owens, and just Owens runs, from Strowman. They run around the other ring. Roode holds off Kevin Owens. Strowman grabs Owens and tosses him back in the ring. Then we just see Strowman just shoulder tackle Owens. Owens, flipping, Owens inside out. Then Strowman ends up laying Owens out with 2 running power slams. Then Strowman ends up laying out Roode with the running power slam too. And pretty much that was what happened after the match. But it was pretty funny with Strowman. How he just shoulder tackles Owens, and then he just lays the both of them out with running power slams. So, but it's pretty much looking at, they want Strowman to come out, the guy to win the Money in the Bank match. So I wish that could possibly happen at Money in the Bank, where Strowman ends up winning and retrieving the briefcase, and being Mr. Monster in the Bank, and challenging Lesnar for the Universal title. My pick to win the men's Money in the Bank has got to go to Braun Strowman. So, and then we had Sami Zayn coming out for his public apology of the whole Lashley sister situation last week. And Sami ends up saying, last week didn't go as he hoped, and he went too far, and WWE management has graced him a public apology. And to me, Sami Zayn shouldn't be the one apologizing. WWE creative should be the ones apologizing for that horrible piece of shit diarrhea segment last week with Lashley's sisters, dressed up as men, with men dressed up as women. It was a whole piece of shit segment. I really want to block it out of my memory. It was just a piece of shit segment. And Sami Zayn says he was bombarded with text messages and emails about the situation, and he says he lied and that it wasn't Lashley's real sisters. Well, no, duh, it wasn't his real sisters. And he goes, it was men that he hired to to entertain. And he says he's sorry for the whole thing. Like I said, Sami shouldn't be the one apologizing. And he says everything he said last week was true, and the stories was true. And he says he's trying to expose Lashley. He says that the crowd should feel sorry for him and apologize to him. Bobby Lashley ends up coming out, says he salutes and thanks families who are in the military, who served, and who are still serving and have fought for the country, because of Memorial Day. And Lashley says that Sami and him have some issues, and he says to have a match. He wants to have a match with Sami at Money in the Bank. And Lashley wants Sammy to back up the trash talk and shake his hand. Sammy ends up shaking Lashley's hand. And he says at Money in the Bank, Sammy ends up telling Lashley that at Money in the Bank, he's going to haluva kick the smile off Lashley's face. And Lashley ends up squeezing Sammy's hand hard, where he's just going, ow, 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 ow. And then Lashley ends up saying to Sammy that, he has an apology of his own. And his apology is, for whatever he does at Money in the Bank. And that's how the segment ended. But the segment, it was just meh to me. Wasn't that great of a segment. Then we had Drew McIntyre versus Chad Gable. This match wasn't that great. The crowd was pretty much dead for this match. There was no cheering. But Drew McIntyre really shined in the match. From what I heard, in articles, Vince and Triple H are really behind Drew McIntyre. And Drew McIntyre ended up winning the match with the Claymore to Chad Gable. And all in all, the match itself, it wasn't that great, in my opinion. But Drew McIntyre really shined in the match. So, sorry about that. But after the Drew McIntyre versus Chad Gable match, we had the B Team Memorial Barbecue. And we saw, the Ascension there. We saw Breezango, Heath Slater, and Rhino. And Sally, the Revival, was in this. And also Titus O'Neil and Apollo Crews. Pretty much basically, it was basically Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas begging, for them to get a Raw Tag Team Championship match. Saying that the both of them should get that opportunity before anyone else who was in that ring. And Curtis ends up saying that he and Bo should challenge, Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt for the tag team titles. And Heath Slater says to them that they aren't cutting any lines for the tag team titles. And Curtis says, they are, from what, Heath Slater said, they are taking all the food back. And then it just ends up being a food fight. It was funny. We saw Rhino sitting in a chair. He was eating a lot of bologna sandwich. He was eating bologna sandwiches there. And then we saw Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas. They end up putting Rhino through the table, which pretty much that basically ended the segment. I thought this was going to be a shitty segment, but it ended up being pretty funny in the end with the food fight. Gave me a chuckle. So yeah, but it was a funny segment. Then we had Curtis and Bo approach Kurt Angle. They say they demand a tag team championship. They demand a Raw Tag Team Championship match with Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt. Facing Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt. And Kurt says next week they will set it in the ring, and it will be a battle royal, and the winners will face Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt. So next week we're gonna have a battle royal, tag team battle royal. So then we had the main event, which was the women's gauntlet match to qualify for the Money in the Bank. This was a second chance for the women who lost their qualifying Money in the Bank matches. It was Bayley, Liv Morgan, Sarah Logan, the Riott Squad, Ruby Riott, Dana Brooke, Mickie James, Sasha Banks. Bayley was the first one to come out for the Gauntlet match. She was getting interviewed about the match. Bayley says, she never backed down to a fight, and she's bringing the fight to all the women who are in this Gauntlet match. And so the first opponent that Bayley was facing was Liv Morgan of the Riott Squad. And Bayley defeated Liv Morgan in 3 seconds. She ended up hitting a Bayley to belly on Liv Morgan. Then she ended up facing Sarah Logan. She ended up rolling up Sarah Logan and winning the match. Then Bayley got to face Ruby Riott, which Ruby Riott, I say, during this whole Gauntlet match, she was good in this match. Ruby Riott, she really shined during this whole Gauntlet match. She ended up defeating Bayley with the Riott kick. Then Ruby Riott ended up facing Dana Brooke. She ended up beating Dana Brooke also with the Riott kick. Then she faced Mickie James. Ruby Riott faced Mickie James after Dana Brooke. This was in Mickie James' hometown, and the crowd really was behind her. And Ruby Riott ended up winning the match and defeated Mickie James. Well, not win the match though, but she ended up beating Mickie James with the roll up. And then after she beat Mickie James, Ruby Riott ended up facing Sasha, and both of them put on a good match, in the Gauntlet match, and both of them were really good. But Ruby Riott outshined. Ruby Riott was the main. I'm sorry about that, but I was saying, Ruby Riott was really good in this match. I really would have wanted Ruby to win the match, win the Gauntlet match, and qualify for the Women's Money in the Bank. But Sasha ended up winning the match, win the Gauntlet match. She ended up winning it with the end up hitting the banks, putting Ruby Riott in the bank statement. So Sasha is now qualified as the last participant in the Women's Money in the Bank. So yeah, so that was basically Raw tonight. So yeah, so anyways, that's it for my review of tonight's edition of Monday Night Raw. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all back here tomorrow night for my SmackDown review.